So again, Sadie is from Yale. Her proposal centered around hot springs, environmental impact, and tourism. And it's going to be very interesting to hear how this has evolved since she arrived in January. She's affiliated with the university, the Icelandic University of the Arts, where she is working amongst others with Ólöf Nordal. And from her proposal, I remember that she's planning an interactive exhibition at some point towards the end of her project, and also possibly a book. So very exciting. Sadie, take the floor, please.
Hello.
Stop. I'm trying to stop my share. There you go.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Sadie Cook. I'm an artist and a photographer. And my project is Bodies in the Sublime. I included here the 3 emotions that one might experience if one thinks really hard about hot springs in Iceland, which is happiness, sadness, and like a sort of shocked awe expression. Tragically, because these works, the photographs of the hot springs themselves will be up for publication and showing at the end of the year. I can't show any of those pictures, but I have plenty more planned for you, so don't worry. So I wanted to start off with talking a little bit about photography, which is my main medium for exploring, interpreting, and just existing in the world. And I've included here 3 quotes that kind of bounce around in my head when I think about photography. The first one is by Susan Sontag, who many of you may know. Let me go back. Yeah, Susan Sontag, who many of you might know on photography. And it's this very negative quote, which starts with, "To photograph people is to violate them, by seeing them as they never see themselves, by having knowledge of them that they can never have. It turns people into objects that can be symbolically possessed. Just as a camera is a sublimation of the gun, to photograph someone is a subliminal murder, a soft murder, appropriate to a sad, frightened time." The other is from an essay that was written in direct contrast to this essay by Hervé Hubert, or something French like that, called Ghost Image. And that one starts off with the sentence, "Photography is also an act of love." And the other quote is by this book that I am currently obsessed with by Margaret Olin called Touching Photographs, which states, "It is possible to describe the teenager's cell phone photograph as a witness to her devotion, as well as a surrogate companion to her boyfriend. Photography merges the language of witnessing with the language of the index." So photographing somebody is a really complicated thing. And photography in general is a complicated thing that feels to me that something both tender and loving and a bit violent and possessive and very intimate. It's a weird act. Now, these are the things that I typically work with when I work with photography. Gender, which is, includes queerness. Obviously, I am very queer. Which is, what's the space between identification with the body and desire? Do I act like a woman? What does that mean? What does it give me? Does that even matter? And the usual existential crisis-y questions. And touch, which is, what's the difference between a touch that causes pain and one that causes pleasure? Is it just pressure and time? Can you show that in a photograph? What does it mean if you can't? So I'm going to go through some of the work that I've been finishing up and editing during my time in Iceland, which is predominantly around this, and then go into the project itself. And I do want to mention that this work will include both nudity and also some mention of assault and violence. It should be about 3 minutes. So if you don't want to watch if you don't want to see those pictures, then just don't look. We won't be able to tell and nobody will judge. So this is self-portrait swallowing a mirror, around touch, gender, desire, self-portrait bathroom, stranger, 147, thinking about what does it mean to age as a woman and the power and play that can come into that. What does it mean to be very young as a woman? Stranger, I think 63. Self-portrait basement. Untitled, thinking about touch. Untitled. Self-portrait State Street. What does it mean to be bound? Self-portrait raped, thinking about touch and the traces of touch left on a body. Self-portrait kitchen. Alex in the car. Self-portrait holding light. A picture taken in Iceland. Don't tell anybody I'm showing you it. Self-portrait kitchen sink. Now, so that's a brief view of the photographs I've been working with, and then I wanted to talk a tiny bit about the project that I just finished up while being here, which is my breath. When I think about photographs, they're objects that are touched and exist in the world. And I just completed this project that's a photo book. Last week, it was actually acquired by a museum, which is really exciting. And to me, this is a project in which I scanned my breath. And then I interlaced those scans with photographs. Because to me, photographs, images conveyed on breath could be a definition of speech. And I wanted the book to feel like I was sitting next to you and you asked how I was doing and I gave you a real answer. This is what that project looked like. Now, bodies in the Sublime. So, hot springs in Iceland are a very complicated and beautiful thing. If you think about hot springs and you think about the Icelandic position visually in the world in general, it's actually very bizarre because in the late 90s and 2000s, Iceland's visual image in the world entirely changed from literally being described as hell on earth to being one of the preeminent tourist destinations in the US and, you know, around the world. And that's a very dramatic turnaround that came around very deliberately through Icelandic air companies and the government in general. Of course, the problem is that Iceland's environment is incredibly delicate. Think about that moss that I'm sure we've all heard about, where as soon as you touch it, it holds that trace of the body. And hot springs in particular are a very bizarre situation because they're a space where you are literally immersed in nature and in the wild in a way that feels to me nearly sexual. So tourists in Iceland are kind of leaving their own traces in the hot springs through trash, through the hairs of these millions of bodies that all congregate in these spaces. And, you know, through the infrastructure that's built around the springs to support them. Here's some quick pictures that I pulled off of Google. Here's some of those tourist campaigns. And here are some of the more interesting ways that the body and hot springs in Iceland have been combined through, you know, tattoos that people get of the Icelandic landscape on their body, because it is such an important part of Icelandic culture and identity in general, and through the literal selling of the Icelandic landscape as a mud for people to put on their faces. Of course, there haven't really been any tourists here, so those images are slowly emerging. But what I have been doing is a project that I'm calling the Golden Dip, which is a project that I'm working on with a collaborator who's a former Fulbrighter to Bulgaria, of all places, who ended up in Iceland, called Christina Humanik. And we began to think about hot springs' role as both places where, you know, Icelandic teenagers go to have sex, and also of their history as spaces of baptism and religion. And of course, the age-old question, are hot springs gay? To which the answer is yes, they are gay. Because they are something that's different from any other body of water, which is they're hot. And because they are spaces that are sexualized, and also, you know, a big point in religion in Iceland, at least historically. So we produced this book. We began to think about these spaces as spaces of transformation, both for health and also for baptism. So we went to, we both Kristalina and I want to be things that are not human, because being a person is hard. So we invented a ritual to turn ourselves into not human, which is held in this book that we published together called The Golden Dip. And we dedicated this book to the cult leaders that both of us have been involved with, which some of you may know. Here is the photographs of both of those leaders, one of which is a mugshot of somebody that some of you might be familiar with. And here is the beginning of the ritual. Here is a documentation of that ritual. And when we showed this work, we sort of treated ourselves as a religious institution in and of ourselves, and created a space that looked something like this. So the components of this were traces that we left in the hot spring itself, and were left by the hot spring on our bodies in the forms of photographs, as well as these traces of our bodies on light and the water that our bodies collected while we were in the ritual, held on light-sensitive cloth. If you would like to transform into something else, specifically water, and be baptized into something, you can access our ritual on our YouTube channel, or on www.truthdip.world, or on our OnlyFans account, which is Sadie_cook_seeks. I highly recommend you subscribe. I need some more subscribers. And I just wanted to mention my beautiful students' beautiful works. I've been working closely with young artists at the Icelandic University of the Arts in producing shows and acting as a guest critic for them and creating panels for them. And their final show is coming up next week. Everybody should come see it. It is the most popular show every year in Iceland, happening at the Icelandic Art Museum. And that's it.
Corrie, so I wanted to talk a little bit about our Arctic program because we're starting that right now. So CORRIE is going to be our first speaker to talk about a wide variety of topics, but all related to the Arctic. As many of you know, we have a large Fulbright National Science Foundation Arctic grant program. And that program supports both PhD students and scholars to come to Iceland to do Arctic related research. And CORRIE is our only PhD student in that group this year. And she is working with the University of Iceland, if I remember correctly. I hope I do. CORRIE, I'm just going to give you the floor to tell us all about. She's actually looking into a small organism here that I had never heard of. I remember that, but apparently is so important to following what is happening with certain fish breeds during climate change. So that's something we're all going to want to hear about. So CORRIE, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Belinda, for that introduction. And yes, you got it right. It's University of Iceland. So hopefully everyone can see. Hold on. There we go. Is everyone seeing the first slide? Okay. So Belinda did a lot of my introduction, really. Thank you for that introduction. I'm CORRIE. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Minnesota, Department of Entomology. And I'll be presenting my project that I conducted over this winter through the Fulbright NSF Arctic Research Fellowship for students, as Belinda mentioned. And my project is focused on the biodiversity and winter activity of chironomids in Iceland. And this is a project that I'm conducting as the final, for the final portion of my PhD dissertation. Chironomids are commonly known as midges, and these are a speciose, or very species-rich and abundant family of aquatic flies. They are aquatic as larvae or immatures, and then they emerge as terrestrial winged adults. They are found really globally in distribution, from the Arctic all the way down to Antarctica. And the cold adapted chironomids in particular are winter emerging in lower latitudes like temperate regions, but can be found active year-round in subarctic and Arctic areas such as Iceland. And these are the non-biting midges, known in Iceland as rikmi. And on this slide, I have some pictures of Icelandic chironomids. The top is a picture of a winter active chironomid, and the bottom is an image of a summer active chironomid species. The adults of these insects are able to be winter active because they can supercool. And what this means is not just that they're super cool, which they are in my opinion, but they're able to depress the freezing point of their body fluids below the point of ice crystal formation. So they basically have antifreeze in their blood. And winter active chironomids have been found from Poland, Norway, and parts of North America, but none have officially been published as winter active from Iceland, although there are some species that are shared between Iceland and Norway, which have been documented as being winter active in Norway, but they have not been officially documented in Iceland. The pictures on this slide are images of different species of winter active chironomids from different regions. The top is a picture of a male Dimesa mendoti from Minnesota, and the bottom is a pair of mating adults of Dimesa permacra. And this is a species that is commonly found as a winter active chironomid in Poland. I mentioned Dimesa mendoti in the previous slide. Dimesa is a cold adapted genus with 107 species distributed across the Northern Hemisphere. And Dimesa mendoti from Minnesota has been documented as being active from temperatures ranging from -7 to 10 degrees Celsius over the winter time. And in Iceland, there are 8 different species of Dimesa that have been recorded, but not necessarily from the winter time. The images on this slide, the top is a picture of a female Dimesa mendoti, just to kind of give you an idea of what the females look like of this species. And the bottom image is a map of the distribution of Dimesa bohemini in Iceland. And this is one of Iceland's most commonly found Dimesa species. And you can see that it's distributed basically in every region of Iceland. And there are some other species that are almost just as abundant as Diomysa boehmeni and some others that are really rare, but overall there's 8 different species. So we've discussed these tiny little flies, and this kind of brings up the question, why are they important? Why should we care about these insects? Well, they're important because they are an essential food source for fish during the wintertime. There is evidence that trout consistently select large chironomids when feeding. And for Iceland in particular, chironomids are one of the few insect groups that are prevalent in cold water streams, which are home to salmon and trout. And so these insects provide an essential food resource for these fish during the coldest months of the year. However, climate change is a potential threat to fish food resources. And there is a 10 degrees Celsius increase in temperature that's been estimated for Arctic regions over the next century. And this is based on some of the most extreme climate change models. So while this is an extreme estimate, it still indicates that climate change is an immediate and long-term threat to Arctic regions, and is something that should be considered when thinking about ecological research. So in thinking about climate change, there have been studies that have been documented for Diomysa mendoti from Minnesota and some other cold-adapted Diomysa species from Nepal, as well as some emerging Diomysa species in Iceland that indicate that when adults of these species are exposed to warm air temperatures, this lowers the survival of the insects and their overall lifespan. There is also evidence that when females are exposed to warm air temperatures, this alters the timing of their egg laying or oviposition, as well as the size of their egg masses. So climate warming may be a potential threat to cold-adapted species in other geographic regions where they occur in the world, in addition to Minnesota, Nepal, and Iceland, and also in other seasons. And this is in particular for Iceland because there have been studies on the summer emerging cold-adapted species, but none for the winter active species. And so this raises some unanswered questions because there really is no data on winter activity of chironomids in Iceland and no specific knowledge on what species are active or their life history. And so these were the main objectives of my project here at Iceland. My goals were to identify the species emerging over the winter, document when and under what temperatures they emerge, collect immature stages or the larvae from the streams in order to assess the relative abundance in those environments, and then also to assess how long they can survive under controlled warm and cold temperatures. Over this past winter, I was able to conduct field work on 4 different streams in southern and southwestern Iceland. These were Hammerskotslækur near Hafnarfjörður, 2 streams in the Hengets geothermal valley, and then also a portion of Riti-Rangá, which is a river that flows near Hekla. And I was near the area of Fossbrekka, which is a really pretty waterfall. So you can see the locations of these streams on the map of Iceland in the center of the slide here. And then also the streams I visited at Henget are in the map to the far right. These streams are really close together, so they didn't really show up on the large map. So we have a more zoomed in image here. I used streams 11 and 7 in one of Henget's valleys. So my fieldwork started on December 31st of this last year of 2020, and it's continuing to the present because I still have some equipment out in some of my streams that I need to collect, and so I'm planning for at least a few more field days. Over the winter, I collected the flies from the snow on the banks near some of these streams and rivers, and I collected them into small glass vials, as you can see in the image in the top right of this slide. There's a tiny little fly sitting on top of some snow there. I then transported these vials in a cooler back to the lab in order to make sure they didn't heat up inside the vehicle, and then I also placed temperature loggers in my streams in order to record temperature on an hourly basis. And I have a picture of what these temperature loggers look like on the bottom of the slide here. Back at the lab, I separated the insects between 6 and 20 degrees Celsius treatment, and then also checked them daily, every single day, for survival, and documented when they died, and also recorded their behavior leading up to when they died. I did this following published protocols. And this is just a picture of some of what I've collected this winter, so this is really exciting. I also collected stream sediment samples in order to get an idea of what species are present with the larvae. And I've been sorting through these in the lab. These are just some pictures of the stream samples. And as you can see, there's a lot of dirt and gravel in them. And this can be pretty time consuming to pick through because the larvae can be pretty tiny. In terms of results, I've collected a total of 455 flies over the 23 field collection days from December through April. And this breaks down into 303 females and 152 males. So I'm really happy with these numbers. This is a really good number of individuals collected. And I also made some other really interesting discoveries over the winter time. I found more evidence indicating that these winter active flies do complete their life cycle over the winter time. And this is based on seeing quite a few pairs of individual flies mating on the snow. And I actually have a picture of a pair I collected off the snow in the upper right corner of the slide. You could see a pair in there, they're still in copula. And I just find this really fascinating because it indicates that they're not only able to complete their adult life stage over the winter here, but they're actually reproducing. And this hasn't been documented in Iceland before. I also noted quite a few winter active spiders, and I know that these have been documented in other countries and other regions, but I'm not familiar with any records from Iceland. So I did collect a few of these and took some pictures. And I've basically just been taking pictures of whatever I see active on the snow because I'm not sure what's been documented in terms of winter activity. For preliminary results, I have found that the worm temperature treatments significantly reduce the lifespans of the flies that I had in those treatment groups. And we can see the results for this in the figure here. So on the up and down axis or the y-axis, we have the longevity or the number of days individuals are living. And then on the x-axis or the bottom axis, we have the different treatments, cold and warm. So in the cold treatment, the individuals lived on average around 15 days, but some lived close to 50 days, which is incredibly long for these insects. And in the worm treatment, individuals lived on average around 2 to 3 days and then died. And there was a significant difference between these treatments. And this was also reflected with the egg laying behavior and the timing of oviposition. I found that the worm temperature significantly reduced the timing of egg laying, and we can also see this in the figure here. So on the up and down or y-axis, we have the day of oviposition, and we have the different treatments on the lower axis again. So the females in the worm treatment laid eggs significantly later after collection compared to females in the worm treatment. And the females in the worm treatment basically laid eggs and then died shortly after. So far, my results are fitting with my hypotheses, which is really exciting. But I do have some things I still need to finish. I still need to collect the loggers from my streams and analyze water temperatures. And I also need to identify the adults that I have collected to species level, although so far it looks like they are mostly different species of Diomysa. And once I do that, I'll continue with analyses. And then I also need to finish sorting stream samples and identifying larvae. But so far, this has just been a really incredible experience. These are just some spectacular moments from the field this past winter. And I don't need to tell anybody that Iceland is beautiful. Iceland is absolutely gorgeous. I've just been really blown away by how beautiful it is during the winter time. And these are some moments that I will always treasure. I've also been able to really expand my academic and professional network while I've been here. I've been able to participate and present at the Ecological Society of Iceland conference, which was held from April 16th through 17th just last month. And I also joined the Nordic Society Oikos, which is the ecological society that oversees the Ecological Society of Iceland. And with the help of my host, I also registered for the 38th International Polar Symposium, which is going to be held in Poland this upcoming fall. And I'm planning on presenting some of my work there as well. I've also been able to network with my hosts for postdoctorate opportunities for after I defend. And I've been able to have some really useful conversations with them in terms of what's available in Iceland for postdoctorate opportunities, what funding is available for research, and just discussions on different researchers they know within the field of Arctic stream ecology, which is a field that I want to continue to pursue in the future. And I also joined the Association of Polar Early Career Scientists, which is an organization I learned more about through the Ecological Society of Iceland. In terms of activities outside of research, I've really found that you can really deepen your cross-cultural connections over shared hobbies and even pets and animals. So I've been doing a lot of writing while I've been here in Iceland, and I've written here and there over the years, but I've been really able to get to it here in Iceland. And I've learned a lot about the writing culture, which is really interesting because here it is a middle-class activity, and in Iceland, back in the US, it's an upper class privileged activity. So it's been really interesting to learn about it here and just connect with Icelanders over this shared hobby. I've learned a lot about the Icelandic horse, its history and its special gaits. So for those of you who don't know, the Icelandic horse is a gated horse, which means it has some special additional gaits that horses typically don't have. So horses typically have walk, trot, and gallop, but the Icelandic horse also has turth and scythe or flying pace. So it's been fun to learn about those and practice them, and I'm pretty happy with my riding so far. I think I'm getting pretty good. And I've also been able to connect with people over the Icelandic sheepdog, and I've been learning a lot about the breed. There were a lot of times over this past winter where I was accompanied in the field by an Icelandic sheepdog because her owner would help me with field work, so that was really fun. And I also got a chance to meet a breeder who owns a small dairy farm over this past winter. And while I was visiting, I not only got to learn more about the breeding of this unique dog breed. This breed is it's native to Iceland. It was brought over by the Vikings, and I got to see some adorable puppies, which was a huge bonus of that visit. But I also got to learn more about dairy farming in Iceland, which I found really exciting because I grew up on a small dairy farm in Minnesota. And so it was fun to make that connection and find that common ground, and also learn about how breeding of these dogs contributes a little income, extra income to small family-owned farm businesses in Iceland. And so I can safely say that in the future, I will be considering purchasing an Icelandic sheepdog based on my experiences with the breed here. And when I do so, I will purchase from a local Icelandic breeder. So with that, I just want to thank the Fulbright program and the Fulbright Commission Iceland for providing funding and for providing really the opportunity for me to conduct this amazing project over the winter time here. And also a huge thank you to my hosts at the University of Iceland and the Marine and Freshwater Research Institute, Drs. Gisli Mar Gesselsen and Jonas Olofsson, for agreeing to be my hosts and for supporting me through this project. It really would not have been possible without them or the Fulbright program. So huge thank you. And with that, I will open up for any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you so much, Corrie. That was fascinating.